Hit the record.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, well, great to have you again joining us for Neighboring 101. This is the monthly session where we join together online with others who are interested in the topic of neighboring. We hear from opinion leaders all across the country on how organizations and individuals can use the art and skill of neighboring to improve their community and their own lives as well. So thank you for joining us today. Just a reminder that if you have missed a past session or two, those class videos are posted online. They are unlisted on YouTube, so the only way to get access to them is the recap email that goes out after each class. So look at those emails for the links to those unlisted class videos. We've got 31 of them and a few bonus sessions, so a lot to catch up on if you've not been able to attend live. Use the chat today. Chat is open. It's a great way to ask questions, to share links, to offer encouragement, to privately message others that are in this session to help grow your network. But I'd encourage you to use the chat today, and hopefully you all have lots of questions to ask. You don't want me to ask all the questions for the whole hour. Two other items real quickly. This class now has members from 94 of Missouri's 115 counties and from 38 states now. We have 4 new members as of this month. I wanted to say welcome to Suzanne Luther from Jefferson City, Chance Parrish from Springfield, Missouri, Victoria Prokop from Columbus, Ohio, and Kelly Whiteston from Portland, Oregon. Thank you for joining us and being part of Neighboring 101. So just a short seasonal announcement before we do our speaker introduction. In this world of sort of crazy and outrageous internet challenges, it's nice to come across a challenge that actually helps spread kindness among neighbors and encourages a work ethic. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called the 50-Yard Challenge. It is promoted by an Alabama-based nonprofit organization called Raising Men and Women Lawn Care Service. It was started by Rodney Smith Jr. when he was in college. He has a social work degree. He's now full-time employee of that nonprofit. And the goal is to encourage boys and girls nationwide to offer free lawn mowing services for people in their neighborhood who are veterans, disabled, widowed, or maybe otherwise disabled, and single moms. You have to be between the ages of 8 and 17. You can visit their website. I'll put that in the link. But as a student, when you sign up, they send you safety glasses and earplugs to get you started. When you have mowed 10 yards, they send you a t-shirt. They send you a different colored t-shirt every 10 yards that you've mowed. And when you reach that 50 yard mark, Rodney Smith will personally deliver a Toro lawnmower, blower, and weed eater to you in person. Aww. Now, me, all I got out of this conversation with Rodney was a t-shirt. I explained to him that I mowed yards growing up, and I thought I'd probably mowed about 1,400, but I'd never gotten a t-shirt. So he sent me a bright t-shirt to surprise me by mail. But it is a great organization, and you might find it's a way to address some problems with tall grasses in your neighborhood. Lots of communities talk about that. I'll share the link in the email soon, but again, that's Raising Men and Women Lawn Care Service. You can find them on Facebook or on the web, or if you just look up 50-Yard Challenge, you'll find them as well. So get those youth enlisted in mowing some free yards. Well, our guest speaker today, I know you're all excited. I'm excited to have a nationally known author and speaker join us. Majora Carter is an urban revitalization strategist. She's a real estate developer. She's a MacArthur Fellow, Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. She's the owner of the Boogie Down Grind Cafe in the Bronx. If I ever go to the Bronx or New York, I'm visiting the Boogie Down grind and taking a selfie out front with my coffee. She's also the author of a book that many of you received in the mail and have read, Reclaiming Your Community. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. What a great book title. I love that. Here's another interesting little factoid about Majora Carter, though.
Oh.
Her TED Talk, Greening the Ghetto, was one of the first 6 publicly released talks to launch TED.com website in 2006. So she's been at this for quite a while. She started when she was a mere child, very young. But she has a lot of firsthand experience in pioneering sustainable economic development in one of America's most storied, sort of low status communities, the South Bronx. And I'll put her website in the chat as well. You can learn more on that website. But Majora, thank you for sharing your time with us today, and so excited to talk about your book and your perspective on this very important topic.
Thank you. So thank you for having me, Professor Burton. Really excited to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to get through my presentation really quick so we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So wait, there. Close the share.
Very good. Gotta love technology.
Were you? I'm sorry. I stopped sharing. Were you able to see anything?
I was able to see the share screen. It did come up.
Were you able to hear me?
Not if you were speaking, no.
Okay, so I'm gonna get on. Yeah, it's done. I'm sorry. Hold on. Zoom is horrible.
Don't you love technology, right?
All right. No, this is like, I don't understand, but this literally just happened a little while ago. So I'm gonna get on just the voice. Oh, wrong. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
But
you do have co-host abilities, I believe. Yes.
Oh yeah. But this is the way you can hear me. So I'm gonna dial in again. So I'm gonna mute myself here.
Well, raise your hand if you've never had a glitch with Zoom. Okay. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, I'm going to turn this volume down. So can I hear you?
I hope you can.
Yes, I can. Okay, so now I'm going to share this screen and we're going to be good. Okay, let's see. Yep, there we go. All right, it works. So can you see the screen?
Yes.
And you could hear me?
Yes, we
Perfect.
got both.
Oh, yay!
Perfect.
Joy and rapture.
Okay. Look at us go.
So, okay, yeah, it's just always super horrifying. So again, thank you so much for having me. And the real important thing here is that, so I did write this book and, thank you for anybody who's read it, but it's not that important if you haven't, but I do want to be really clear when I, for those of you who hadn't read it, I actually stuck my glossary up in the front of the book. Like literally it's before I'm pretty sure it's before the preface and all that stuff, because I really wanted people to know what I was talking about. So I do use a term called low status communities and throughout the book, and that these are the communities that are often referred to as poor or low income or underprivileged. However, we use low status because status implies that something much larger is at work, that inequality in and of itself is a well-established fact. And these are the places where schools and public health and air quality and water quality, parks and trees, food options, and even career opportunities are worse in there than in other parts of the same town. Think of the communities like this near you. They're everywhere. They're inner cities, they're Native American reservations, they are, poor white Rust Belt towns, where industry has come and gone, and they're all over the world, and bright kids who grew up in them are expected to measure success by how far they get away from those neighborhoods. They're in urban and rural and suburban places. But the thing that's most important to note is that they're the places where inequality is assumed by people who live there and also by everyone on the outside looking in. And so this talk is about our approach to community development, which focuses on a talent retention strategy. And I'm sure y'all are all familiar with that term because it's a very common thing that happens in the business community. Because when you think about it, successful companies, they don't invest in talent so that their competition can hire them away. They want to keep their people motivated and inspire them to kind of lean in and grow with the company and to grow with it, so that when their well-being is tied up to the company's well-being, and they feel that. And honestly, it's not always about money, although that certainly helps. But basically, successful companies practice talent retention because they see that is how you keep people. But we spend, as a society, billions and billions of dollars in government, philanthropic, and even private dollars. They're spent in low status communities to allegedly support the people that are in them. Yet the overall outcomes, in terms of health and education, even involvement in the justice system, all sorts of things, they don't get much better. And we don't do much to retain the talent that was born and raised in those neighborhoods, because truth be told, we have never, nowhere in America, have we ever had an issue with talent being born and raised in low status communities. What we do have a problem with in low status communities everywhere is keeping them in those neighborhoods so that they can reinvest in them in their own community. And so I believe that talent retention, the same tool that's used in the business community in order to support their bottom line, can also be used to help build great neighborhoods. And that makes me super happy, because that's what I'm going to tell you about, for the people that are born and raised in them. And so my hometown is the South Bronx here in New York City. And I would say that it's the kind of neighborhood that would probably resemble more of a talent, instead of a talent retention strategy, had more of a talent repulsion strategy. So this is the South Bronx that I grew up in. Back in the 1980s, this was the neighborhood that I had to walk through. I walked right down the street. It was 2 blocks away from my house to the subway, and I walked down this street in order to get there, and it would take me to one of the best high schools in the country. And it was a very different community than what my dad and mom moved into in the early-ish 1940s. And that's when they were both parts of the, I would say, the domestic terrorism. He was from Georgia, small, tiny town in Georgia, and my mom was from South Carolina. They moved up north looking for their great American dream. And they ended up settling in actually at that time, it was almost exclusively white neighborhood in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx. And then other folks, Black folks from down south, and then Black and brown folks from the Caribbean followed suit, again, all looking for their great American dream. White flight happened. The highway construction boom. Also, this is the Cross Bronx. The Bronx is known for having like a spaghetti network of highways that cover all it. And it literally, you can see from here, it kind of like it was literally built on top of thriving neighborhoods. Redlining happened, that's when, the system that financial institutions and banks basically decided that, where they were not going to make any kind of investments. So whether it was, loans or mortgages, et cetera. And I grew up in zip code 10474. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that. Sorry. And so much of the light industry that we had in the community also couldn't get loans and stuff in order to support financing to support their businesses. So many of them moved to right to work states or offshore. And seeing that was also a really interesting thing, because what took its place was this type of municipal infrastructure. So whether it was, it was basically our neighborhoods became like a regional sacrifice zone for all the waste facility, power plants, energy needs, but usually the kind of burdensome environmental facilities that essentially that wealthier and usually whiter communities could afford to avoid in New York City. Oh, and that's around the time that I came in. I remember this photo completely. I was about 4 and I was on the phone with Santa Claus, telling folks that, hey, this is my, I've been a really good girl. So, and I'm here with the Easter Bunny. So he'll vouch for me. I've been a really good girl. So take care of me. But this is what I grew up with. So when you think about all the financial disinvestment that was happening in the neighborhood, nobody could get real financing to keep their houses and keep the buildings or keep their businesses, afloat in any way. So one of the things that happened was landlords would often torch their buildings, like literally commit arson in order to get insurance money. And so this was the South Bronx that I grew up with. And so even though, and it was really interesting, we lost about 60% of the population during that time. And I will never say that we had, that it wasn't like, we had some serious problems, but, like the beginning of the summer that I turned 8 years old that year, the beginning of the summer, both buildings at either end of my block burned down, like big apartment buildings. And then at the end of the summer, my brother was killed as a result of the drug wars that took place there. But so again, it was not perfect in any way, shape, or form, and we did have problems. However, we were still very much a community, and a beautiful one, that, there were people there who loved each other, and, we were very much a family. And so I think that was, even though we would hear reports on the nightly news about how awful our neighborhood was, and according to the media, we were nothing more than a collection of pimps and pushers and prostitutes. And but we knew that wasn't true at all. Well, sometimes it was true, but there was a whole lot more of us. And guess what? Nothing has changed. We still are a community of incredibly wonderful people. We've got people that are they have daycare providers, literally raised 3 generations of people in our community. They're entrepreneurs, they're social media influencers. They work in the legal and the medical profession. They're just like super cool folks. They're really innovative. The young lady here on the left in the Coze with my Rose t-shirt, she has she started this amazing business that combined 2 of her greatest loves, which is both wine and books. And so it's called the Lit Bar, lit like literature, lit like tipsy. And I just love that. And so she's wildly successful. She's from literally, as the crow flies, not far from here. And it's did it in the Bronx. If any of you are into celebrity chefs, you might recognize the man in the colorful plants. In the top photo, that's Marcus Samuelson, who is a owner of and started some amazing restaurants and is like, he's a celebrity chef. Come up and visit us. The young man in the middle picture on the bottom, the young man in the middle of the bottom picture is Christian Navarro. He made, his big break in Hollywood was when he played Tony Romero in 13 Reasons Why, a Netflix show a few years ago, and he's still doing fine, still a really great working actor. Grew up right up the street from here, really kind of amazing dude. But all that to say is that we have this kind of thing, but great people coming up in our community. But I grew up, at a time when it was just like, I'm out, and we literally were taught to measure success by how far to get away from here. And and I got it, and again, I was going to one of the best high schools in the country, and I made a point, to get myself into a great college, and I did. And I only had to come back home when I was broke and needed a cheap place to stay when I started graduate school at NYU. And it was such a defeat to move back into my old room. Although I'm grateful that mommy and daddy let me, but still it felt like a defeat. But what was fascinating, is that for the most part, I didn't spend any time here. And it was only until, I discovered that there was actually like some cool people in my neighborhood that ran an awesome a center, an art center. And I was like, wow, people just like me who are really cool, that I couldn't believe it. But it was then and only then when I realized that the city and state were planning on building a huge waste facility on our waterfront. And that's when I understood, oh my goodness. And because I did have some education and some distance, and even though there were awesome people doing cool stuff in my neighborhood, it was clear that our city and state didn't see us as valuable. And I realized that the reason why they were going to build this huge waste facility on our waterfront was because we happened to be a poor community of color. And honestly, if I just been like, you know what, nothing I could do, I'm just going to go and like live my life somewhere else, nobody would have blamed me. But I felt like I couldn't do that. So I actually got very much involved in the working, to support the community in terms of helping to create a much more sustainable solid waste management plan that the city could take a look at and then later on adopt. But the other thing that was super exciting to me was thinking about like, not just what are we fighting, against, but what are we fighting for? And so part of that was like, what kind of community do we really want to live in? And part of that was really all about things like, transforming our neighborhood into a place that we wanted to be in, and understanding that it was actually perfect timing when we kept getting approached by this young woman who was working with the New York City Parks Department, because they got funding from the U.S. Forest Service, because they were interested in promoting and supporting the health of threatened urban rivers. And the Bronx River in New York City, which is the only freshwater river we have, was certainly threatened. And so we kept getting notices and visits from this young lady who was like, yeah, we've got these small grants. And I was just like, okay, whatever, because I knew we had a Bronx River, but you couldn't, because I saw it on a subway map, but I'd never visited it, because even though there was a bridge to get you to another neighborhood and you could see it, it didn't seem like you could get to it because there was so much industry and dumps along it. And so what I thought I was doing when my dog pulled me into what I thought was just another dump, in the neighborhood, was just, I didn't know where we were going. But again, if you have an 80-pound dog pulling you, you kind of just go along for the ride, which I did. But she pulled me into what I thought was just another dump. And at the end of this dump was this beautiful, huge, like 300-foot expanse of this river that I swear I'd never seen. And I hadn't, because not like that anyway, because it was like 6 a.m. and the sunlight was glinting off the water, and I'd forgotten, like literally, like the weeds and piles of garbage that were over my head, like on the walk, to see this thing. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. More people should see this other than me and my dog. And so I went back, wrote the little proposal, and then ended up using that like tiny little $10,000 seed grant to do things like, work on, getting lunch for folks, buying little supplies so that we can get some of the dumps out, so that we can get a lot of the trash out, just organizing as much as we could to help make it happen. And so, but even though folks in the neighborhood were really clear that they wanted things like parks and open spaces in the neighborhood, we didn't have that history. So people didn't even know what to do with it when we actually got it to this sort of beta version, unless you were like an old friend of mine who liked skating by himself, but he was weird that way. But what we did was, again, use some of that money to develop programming, down there. So boat building, we did canoe rides. We had, little senior citizen centers would come down and do dance classes there. Local kindergartens the teachers would do reading circles, just anything to get, activity down on the waterfront to let people know that that's who we were, and that we had this amazing asset in our own community. And so This is really still, I love this photo so much because I'm clearly just posing in it because I was so ready for my close up. Because I was like, at that point, I'd worked 7 years to make this thing happen. And I was just like, okay, now y'all could take over. And this was at the groundbreaking of a $3 million, park redevelopment, fund that was coming in to take it from this. And actually, by the way, so this is, you can see it's 1998. So this is before we had cell phones and, cameras at the ready at any single moment. It was an ordeal. I know some of the young folks over there don't remember that, but I do. And so this was what it looked like after at least 6 major cleanups. But anyway, this is what it looked like. And I really don't have photos of what it looked like before that, which makes me super sad. But anyway, I remember it up in here. But it went from that to this little beta version. And then this is what it looks like now. And this is the Hunts Point Riverside Park. And,
wow, that is
it's
beautiful.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yes, it is really, really cool. And it's just incredibly well used, well loved, by folks in the community. Plenty of events happen down there even now. And it's just been this really tremendously beautiful spot that people just love, and I got married there back in 06. That is my dog Xena, who literally pulled me into the dump and is now immortalized. I got married there, as you could see. And this is my dog Xena with her well-deserved award for excellence in urban design, which makes me very happy. But it was so interesting. So even after all that, there was still, people loved the park and everything like that, but it was still I think we still sort of had a bit of a fatalistic, idea around our community, that it was never really going to be that great. And so we started, when I was moving into real estate development, I really wanted to know, like, what was it that made people feel like they couldn't have any faith or love in their own community? And we realized, and so when asking people and doing that kind of market research, and a bunch of the people that we decided to ask were like young people, in part because there were so many kids, over the past almost 10 years previous, this was before the pandemic, we had more kids graduating high school and going on to college than we'd had in the previous 30. So it was, as a community, people were real excited about that. But when we would ask them, the students, so what do you think, these graduating seniors in particular, so what do you think the neighborhood needs now? And they would say things like, oh, well, we need more, affordable housing for really poor people. And we need more homeless shelters because that's basically what's going to happen to them. We need more programs, for kids to keep them out of trouble. And we need more health clinics because people are really sick all the time. And I was like, okay, so when you graduate high school and go on to college and, get yourself a career, are you coming back here or to a neighborhood like it? And they were just like physically recoil and was like, why would I do that? Like you just said, like, this is what I'm gonna be doing with my life. Why would I do that? Why would I come back to a place like this? To them, all the things that they talked about, they were markers of the kind of neighborhood that they wanted nothing to do with. They were markers of poverty. And so to them, and it was clarified, by all of the hundreds and hundreds of surveys that we did, which was, hey, no, this here is a problem. And we don't want to be associated with it. And so, but when we ask people, but when you look at the way that the neighborhood had been developed, like for decades upon decades, it was almost as if, in particular by the nonprofit industrial complex, and the developers that were designing, for it, and also many of our elected officials who were kind of in the same vein, it seemed as though poverty in and of itself was the cultural attribute within our community. And almost as if, and because the same kind of development kept happening, it was almost as if that in and of itself was neighborhood preservation. But when we ask people, so what are you looking for in the neighborhood that you desire? Is this like part of the culture? Is this something that you're looking for? And we didn't ask them that, because that's a real policy wonky question. We asked them basically, what are you looking for in the community you desire? And we asked it many different ways. But ultimately, what bottom line was, they didn't want any of the things that were currently here, or any of the things that they thought people in the neighborhood needed. Now, what they wanted were the things that they were leaving the neighborhood in order to experience and spend their money on. And it was just like, so why aren't we doing that in our own neighborhood? Why aren't we building the kind of housing that, people are aspiring to be in, because, they have maybe done well for themselves and can afford it, not like really super filthy rich housing, but like, they're not only, in very highly subsidized housing for very poor people. They wanted housing that matched their income. They wanted nicer places to see and be seen in. And that's the kind of thing that they were really clear that they wanted. And what's I think is important to note that in many low status communities, the kind of things that we see happening, only two kinds of development. One is often called gentrification, and we see it, and sort of like writ large in terms of, developments happen that push the poor people out, make it less affordable for them, and then wealthy people take their place. Okay, and then there's that. And then there's also what we call poverty level economic maintenance. And we don't think either one of them is great, but let me show you a little bit what poverty level economic maintenance looks like. Do you have a different array of different kind of food choices, healthy and not, restaurants, as well as like greasy spoons, or do you just have the greasy spoons, along with fast food joints? Probably if you're in a low status community, it looks like this, that's what you got. You can spend your money, find places that'll take your money in low status neighborhoods, but oftentimes you'll wish that you had other places to go and spend your money. If you see, if 99-cent stores or dollar stores are your main retail option, you're definitely in a low status neighborhood. If you see pharmacies, it just to let you know, low status communities all over the United States, a big portion of their balance sheet actually come from the kind of conditions that are often prevalent in low status neighborhoods: diabetes, obesity, certain heart conditions, or certain like cancers and other kind of conditions that result from the environmental conditions that are in neighborhoods like this. Yeah, so you see plenty of pharmacies, and you'll also see many places where you can get self-medicated as well. I mean, I should really add smoke shops to this picture, because that's for real as well. And then if you want to save your money, you probably will have a very hard time doing that in a low status community, because you won't find banks or credit unions or investment clubs, but you'll find payday loan places or check cashing stores, even rent-a-centers, pawn shops, things of that nature. Basically things that charge you for using your own money. And last, definitely not least, what you'll find are very big amounts of very highly federally subsidized affordable housing. Let me get that out of the way. Okay, affordable housing. And I just want to be clear, because there actually are some folks who think that I hate poor people, and I'm like, no, that's nothing could be further from the truth. But what I do hate, is the concentration of poverty. Because what happens when you do take all of these things, again, the type of infrastructure that we call poverty level economic maintenance, and put it all together and concentrate the poverty, what you're also doing is exacerbating all of the problems that the nonprofit industrial complex will often say that we're trying to deal with through these billions of dollars of money that go into these communities. Everything from poor health outcomes, low educational attainment, higher rates of folks involved in the justice system, the bad policing that goes on with it, the lower community value that is in those neighborhoods, while people that are considered low status are in them. These are the kind of things that make you go like, this here is a problem. So again, that's why the concentration of poverty to me is a real problem. And I think, the other thing is, like, people will sometimes often say that, gentrification starts when you start to see things like doggy daycares or cute cafes in neighborhoods that you didn't see them before. And I would totally argue, I think that gentrification starts to happen long before that. And it really starts to happen like in the minds of people when we start to believe that there is no value in our neighborhoods. And is evidenced by often how quickly people who do own property in our communities, and I'm not talking about the ones, where the historic legacy of separating folks in low status communities from their property, and keeping them, at the discriminatory end of the banking industry. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how so many folks, in low status communities will sell their houses to predatory speculators because they do not believe that there's value in them. So these, for example, these solicitations are the kind of thing they've literally come to my house either by mail or slipped under my door. Now I get phone calls from these gross people, asking me to sell them my house for cash, to take it off their hands. And I'm just like, I know, I understand the value of my home, and my job is to try to help people in my own community and communities like it all over the country understand the value in their own home too, so that they're actually creating more generational wealth for their people, for their own families, quite frankly. And we loved it so much because we used to see these signs up in the neighborhood and we would literally take them down. And we posted this up on Instagram many, many years ago at this point. And one person told us, he was from Baltimore, just like, nope, I have this, I have my children call them up and tell them, get away from my inheritance, which I think is a perfectly reasonable thing for a 7-year-old to do. There you go. So I love that stuff. But this is our approach to development. It's a talent retention strategy. It's about having a beautiful built and natural environment, high quality. Like, of course, that's what we want. We want commercially viable, year-round third spaces, because, people can say what they want, but about the way people in those status communities, like, just want to hand out, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, everybody wants a bargain, of course, but most people do feel some agency at being able to take care of themselves and actually pay for things. We value that, being able to do that. So you want to have some economic developments that allow people to socially gather, whether it's restaurants, cafes, it's a whole host of things. Because you want to promote community, but not necessarily the kind of community centers that we know sort of shady, unimaginative developers will build, just because so they can get a larger floor area ratio, but has nothing to do with actually providing a high quality, community space. And especially since I think often community centers in many places are known as just things that only for kids to do anyway. So nobody really cares about that. You want quality housing as, home ownership too, and also, opportunities for local business development, designed by people in the neighborhood. People want to feel good about where they are. So remember that crack house that I used to walk by on the way to get to my high school? Well, that spot is actually, now we started the Boogie Down Grind there a number of years ago. And the Boogie Down Grind is it's a hip hop cafe, or it's a cafe that's dedicated to hip hop. We just love very, very much. And it's and it's an homage, to the roots of hip hop itself, because as you don't know, the South Bronx is the birthplace of hip hop. You are very welcome. And I know y'all have done some really awesome things wherever you are, sort of taken what it is and run with it. But it's just that kind of great thing. And so people have done everything from open mics to poetry readings, credit repair workshops, book signings, you name it. It's that space has been used by folks, and also, of course, informal gathering as well. So seeing that has been super, super cool. So having that, but all that to say is, to some people, a cafe, and especially in among some social justice circles, it's still considered like a harbinger of gentrification. And so we were actually protested by a group that felt that way, even though it's so funny to me that, coffee in and of itself is it comes from Black and brown countries around the world, and it's the blackest beverage on the planet. But that's a whole other story. But to them, this was a protest that literally happened outside the cafe, a couple years after we started, and I'm selling out the Bronx, using a coffee shop to do it. And so I thought this was really interesting. And yes, I covered up everybody's face, to just, protect them from themselves. But it was such an interesting thing, because the day that we were protested, we were literally hosting a workshop that was presenting the community with opportunities for very low interest loans for homeowners and also small business owners, but also 0% interest loans, because we had actually been able to use one of them, and we wanted to share that with the community. But yeah, so it was ironic that, outside there were like 15 people with bullhorns, yelling about how I'm betraying my community. And then inside there were 40 people trying to figure out how to get some of that, cheap money so they could stay, which I thought was just, ironic. But anyway, life goes on. And we also used it as, so our cafe was one of the first locally owned opportunities for, people to invest in the community. And this is one of our first investors. She name is Sulma. She's Jamaican. She's Honduran. Her husband's Jamaican, and they were literally the first investors in the coffee shop. This is an old, a former rail station that was super, really interesting because it was cut off from rail service like in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And then it was sort of subdivided into a mini storefront. And that's when, and then it actually had the same leaseholder, the guy who owned a topless bar. He had it for 20 years. He signed another 20-year lease, and then he died. And so it sat vacant for almost not vacant. There were all the other, there was a pizza shop, a beauty salon, attorney's office, et cetera. And it sat that way for a while. The Amtrak, who owned the building, eventually realized like, oh, wait, that's our building. And at that point, all the tenants had already were on their way out. And so, but then we acquired the building. First thing we did was hire some kids to sort of like block over some of the graffiti that had come on it that was not really nice. And then we were able to, like, now we're in the process of transforming it into what is a really beautiful event hall. And so this is what it looked like when it was first built out. And now this is after like some of the initial demolition that we did. And so we've been using it that way, as an event hall, which is super, super fun. And so we had everything there from pop-up shops, to really both high-end, low-end video and photo shoots, which has been awesome. And then, I don't know what happened there. Oops. Oh yeah. And so we've actually had world premieres for screenings. This is Malik Yoba, who is an actor from the Bronx who's also turned into a real estate developer as well as a video producer. And so he did a series called I Build New York, and it's mostly an educational thing about real estate development, in New York City. And I happened to be in the first episode, which was fun. But yes, we've hosted screenings. It's just been super, super awesome. And performances, TEDx's. Tarana Burke dropped her second book when she dropped it as a paperback, came out to, she did it at our spot, which was super fun. We've had pro wrestling show up at Bronxlandia, which is really fun. And we're working with an amazing architect called Studio V on actually transforming the whole space, keeping all of the artistic, pieces of it, but then turning it into something else really cool. So we're really excited about it as well. And we're also going to be, thanks to changes within the U.S. Security and Exchange Commissions, we can actually offer, community members invest in it at a very low rate. Maybe I think we can go down as low as $250, and they get the same rate of return as a much larger investor. And the real reason why I'm even alive is because of and in this neighborhood is because of this man and this building. Believe it or not, he was a Pullman porter, and he really wanted to live on the main line that he was on, which was the New York New Haven line, and this was the main building that it went on. And so he actually was on another line. He was out in LA, won $15,000 in a horse race, carried it, back in a satchel, cash, $15,000 cash. And walked up and down the street, in this neighborhood, which is called Hunts Point, and found a white family who was willing to sell their house to a big old black man. And he did. And the rest was history. And I happen to be a part of that. So thank you very much, Pop. But this was, interestingly enough, his last job. He worked as a janitor at this place, which is really horrific. It was a juvenile detention facility called Spofford. And it was finally shut down, I think in 2011, because it was a terrible, terrible place. And so, but I looked at that site and thought, wow, it's 5 acres big. It really should be used as just imagine the transformational, moment of transforming a place that broke people and to being a beautiful space for community development that literally is restorative. Everything from mixed income housing to mixed use commercial development, job creating, real beautiful. And so I was super excited when a couple administrations ago, they decided that they were planning on doing some awesome stuff there, or rather, excuse me, they took me up on the idea that this is what that site should be used for. So everything from mixed income housing to, doing the kind of economic analysis to understanding what type of businesses could come into that area that could create jobs and local opportunities for entrepreneurship. Great public space, commercial and retail, so that you could have a local and living economy. And I was super excited about it. I'm just going to skip this one. But the idea was that we really wanted to change the idea of what passed for development within our community. Like, why couldn't we have, mixed income housing, mixed use commercial development that really spoke to creating better access for people economically, environmentally, and socially, and really transformatively in our own communities. And so we assembled, because it went out to bid finally, a couple of mayoral administrations later. And we put together this amazing team. We had more women and people of color owned firms that were part of my team than New York City has ever seen, on a project this large. Our proposal included 1,200 units of mixed income housing, including 100 units of low income home ownership. We had about 200,000 square feet reserved for, light manufacturing, cultural, commercial space that would have created a minimum of 800 jobs. And we were super excited about that. And we thought, okay, we have just dotted, all the I's, crossed every T's, this is the best thing New York City has ever seen. And we figured if we didn't win this bid, then at least someone at least as good as we would. Now, that's not what our city did. Our city decided that they were going to create, that they were going to do the exact same thing that they always do, real status quo development. And they decided to build a low-income housing project. And the winning bid was truly a low-income housing project with only, a health clinic and a community center. And that was pretty much it. And some fictitious businesses that they made up that literally did not exist. Fortunately, over the years, somebody realized that they could probably do a little bit better. So they did add some better things to it. But at the time, it was so clear that the city was like, oh, and they even went, even though we had a mixed team with mixed people, very diverse. And yes, I had 2 white male leads on my team as well, because I value diversity. The one the city chose was 2 white males, period. And I was like, you're so gosh. Anyways, thank you. But anyway, but it was a little of a crazy kind of thing. But I love this whole idea that this particular quote from Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. It's one of my favorite quotes in the world. I hope, sirs, that you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience, because we've seen what we do when we stick to status quo. Things don't really change unless we are impatient with the idea of things changing. But I know that we can make a move so that we can make things better by creating an approach to development that's socially, environmentally, and economically transformative, so that in low status communities in particular, people will understand we don't have to move out of our neighborhoods in order to live in better ones. Thank you very much.
Wow, Majora, you covered a lot of territory there.
I know.
Now some people would say you're high energy. There's probably other descriptive words, but even after reading the book and then see that again, the one that comes to my mind is tenacious, because you've been at this for a long time now, and it's maybe a bit like a pit bull. You grabbed hold and you've hung on, right?
I would say that.
So is the being tenacious kind of is that the key, you think? Just the longevity, the sticking with it?
Oh, stick-to-itiveness is one of my absolute favorite words. I mean, I didn't realize it was a real word, but yes, it is absolutely one of them, because I feel like if you can just hold on, and sometimes it is for dear life. And I felt like, my fingernails got pulled out, but But it's what's happened when you can see the future. You can see a vision, and you're like holding on to it. I really like think I don't know why I got like a little emotional just thinking about it, but yeah, like and when you could see what it's gonna be and your vision for the future for your own people is sometimes bigger than what they see for themselves. Sometimes it is hard, but yeah, that is exactly how I feel.
Well, I noticed in chat that Laura mentions that the vision is critical. It's you have the ability to see something different
Mhm.
than what is the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And it's
And
hard because we get beaten up. I think, especially in low status communities, we're so led to believe that like nothing really good happens here. And I think that does have an effect on the way people see themselves. And so when someone else tries, and I really think that when I think about the protesters, I'm sure that a good portion of that was just fear. Just like, you can't do that because that's not been done. Like, who says that?
yeah. Now, folks, go ahead and come on with your questions now. You
Yeah.
can jump on or put them in chat.
Oh,
Um,
Could I
yeah.
could I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Sure, Patty.
Hi, Marjorie. What a cool name. I'm plain old Patty.
That's a great name. Hi, Patty.
I loved your book. I lost quite a bit of sleep a couple of nights because I couldn't put it down.
What? Oh, thank you.
My statement though is I am so sorry for the loss of your brother and your dad.
Thank you.
I've lost no siblings yet, and I cannot imagine how hard that is.
It was.
I have lost my daddy, and that is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
It does
Yeah.
get better over time, but there's always a loss.
Yes. But
Pat-
I'm sure you let it fuel you though, and they're watching you.
Well, Patty, thanks for being an encouragement
Thank you.
to Majora and her book. I noticed that Terry in chat says that let's see what that jumped. A lot has changed for the better following your example, Majora, but no one discusses PLEM and NPIC. At least I never hear these terms. You have to remind me which those terms are. Is that
So NPIC is nonprofit industrial complex.
Oh yes,
Which I did not make that term up. That's somebody else. It's like I've seen a lot of it. And PLEM, which is poverty level economic maintenance. And if people don't really discuss it that much, I mean, guys, I think it was we're like been taught that's the way it is. And but they know it when they see it. And that's why it's like, I have been very encouraged, by folks who go like, oh my God, that's it. And I don't want to do that anymore. And that has been so encouraging to me. So encouraging to me. Yeah.
And that idea with the nonprofits really goes along with your statement in the book. I may know this because I thought it was a interesting point. It says we keep spending more to combat poverty and getting less results.
Yeah, totally. And it's just like if it was a business, people would have switched gears. They would have pivoted. That's the word that people love to use. Like, oh no, that's not working. So we got to pivot. But we keep doing the same cycle in low status communities. And I'm like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it is broke, I would think you'd want to be like, nah, we can do something different. But that's generally not the way it works.
Yeah.
And there's a question I see, Morgan Ash, that I actually would like to address, because I realized that what I should have done in my book, and I didn't do it. And when I do a reprint at some point, I will deal with this. But it was the question about, I briefly mentioned land trusts, and I realized what I should have done was actually talk about the way that I actually learned about land trusts. And like in Vermont, where there's like a trust owns the actual land, and then the building is the house is owned by a family. So they get to build equity in their home, not as much, as if they own the land too, but it's something. And that actually creates generational wealth. But I've noticed that in a lot of urban areas, especially like in New York and in the Bronx, what I've heard is that people use the term land trust to talk about things like community centers. And I'm like, that's not creating equity for families. And since we know that home ownership is literally like the way that most Americans who have it, that's how they create generational wealth. That's what we need to be focused on. So I guess I was probably a little more negative about land trust than I should have been. And the next rewrite will be different. It will be, but that's what I meant. So it's like, I actually do think land trusts are amazing, but not the way that they've been, I think, restructured, because I don't think, I mean, it's a community center, so fine, have a community center, but don't don't call it a land trust.
Stephanie asked, do you have any information on how to expand opportunity zone credits for regular and small business loans, like hometown investors, not just large accredited investors?
No, that's the thing. That's what the Security and Exchange Commission new rules. They're called Reg C and Reg CF. And it allows small investors to invest into real estate development projects. So there's sites like Mainvest or smallchange.co. There's a ton of them out there, and you just have to do your research to see like which one, because some are regionally based, and others are just, will only work in certain parts of the country because that's their focus. And but the whole point is it gives people an opportunity to invest a small amount of money into these projects, and they get the same understanding. They can get to look at the same documents and really understand how their money is being used to create a return for them. And they get the same rate of return as a much larger investor. So you just, literally, you just have to like Google crowdfunding investment, and you'll find like a ton. And then you just decide like which ones you want to work with.
Great idea. Great new idea, really.
Yeah.
Michael Britton, I think, asked, how do we prevent the grow up and move out mentality in neighborhoods?
Yeah. So we call like the things that we've been doing, the things like cafes and bars. Those are the things that people were leaving the neighborhood in order to experience. And then if they eventually are leaving those areas, long enough to go experience them, then that's where they're going to move. Right. They don't want to stay in places like where they are. So creating those types of, we call them third spaces. That's, urban planning parlance, like y'all all know that, for a place that's neither work nor home, but, provides a sense of community. And that's what we realize, like how, when people feel that there's something better in their own neighborhood, it gives them reasons to want to hold on. But if our neighborhoods don't have any of those places, and then there's just like, well, why am I here? Because again, the thing that was so fascinating to us was the reasons why people wanted to leave the neighborhoods that they were born and raised in. It was not because of like high crime or anything like that. Those things almost never even registered. It was usually things like, there is nothing to do here. I'm tired of like, people not clean up after their dogs. People don't care. In this neighborhood, there's nothing to do. So it was just like, how about we act like there's something to do? How about we give people something to do? Literally. And it's been so fascinating. Just like, I could see it, at the cafe that we own, and watching people go, never thought I'd want to stay here, but there's this place that I really like. And I've met cool people here. I didn't even know there were cool people in my neighborhood. That is like a common refrain that we hear. Because again, people would literally like pass each other going out of the neighborhood, not even hanging out. It was really fascinating.
I think that totally applies to urban and rural situations the same. But what you did was those focus groups discussion to hear from people, to find out really what was going on. Totally.
And I think it's really important to note, because like I say it, but sometimes people don't hear that this a talent retention strategy works in rural, urban, suburban. It does, and I think rural areas really are going to need it more for a host of reasons. Like I think, and to if you just think about it from a climate perspective, how do you retain, the people that are there to actually who are going to respect the land in ways that many people don't even think about because they've not been in a rural area. Those are the carbon sinks. Like that's going to be a lot of stormwater management. It's going to be the places that we need to keep, from being drilled on. And of course, where our food comes from. So if we can create the kind of holistic approach or recreate the kind of feelings in people that this is where they need to stay, and support, their hometowns in ways that, because so many people leave them, I think it's good, I think it could be a really beautiful thing that will actually help America.
You have time for a couple more questions?
A couple more, yeah.
I know we're running close on time here.
No problem. Yeah.
From Will Cooper, can you suggest any activities or exercises to help interested people develop a vision?
Oh, I mean, what's sort of fun, it's in somewhere, I don't remember which one part it is, but in the back of my book, it's just sort of like a series of discussion questions, and all they're just designed to do is just start people talking, because the more you get people together to think about, well, what do they like and what do they don't like? What do they wish you had more of? That's half the battle, because the same way it's like, that awful saying, misery loves company. So does joy. So does possibility. And when you start thinking about like because when you realize that other people in your own like circle actually have been thinking the same way you have about what a future could look like, it helps everybody feel a lot stronger and see the possibility of what could happen. And I think that's really one of the best ways to consider it. And somebody's got to lead it. And which means that sometimes it's like, having a bunch of people over for coffee, or going to the local spot, and just really, but being intentional about how do you build out the kind of hope and possibility for the future of your neighborhoods.
I see a couple of questions that kind of seem to revolve around this topic of apathy. I think there's some connection there. Maybe this question gets at an aspect of that pretty succinctly. How do you encourage rental population to be invested in a neighborhood?
Yeah, it's hard, not impossible. I think especially, I think it starts with a level of intention, from the get-go, when you're like, you may be a renter, but you're here. So why are you not thinking about the spaces as a wonderful, as since you're here, it should be lovely. I mean, I think it's sort of the difference between, like if you're a renter, you're renting an apartment, you want to make it look nice. Like you don't want to spend that much money, doing it as somebody else's property, but you want it to look good. I think it's like, how do you encourage people to just have that kind of attitude? And sometimes it's as simple, as giving people's reasons to want to be there. And, and I think about some of the folks that often come to our cafe, the fact that, we've set up a space so that they can come in and do their own thing, gives them opportunities to go, oh, wait. So I can, do, if I run an online business, or I can start an online business, I could sit here and, use free Wi-Fi and make it happen here. Right. Or I can, meet somebody, who I can hopefully talk to about, who's going to help me do my marketing, or, someone who is a good photographer. I mean, it's just like creating those types of opportunities for engagement for people to see other folks in their community, because that's half the battle. It's because most people, at least to start, are not going to be owning anything. But they can see what they can own, is their ability to see themselves thrive. And you've just got to give them reasons to see that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's nothing to keep them there.
Well, of course, once we started priming the pump for questions, they've all come in heavily. If people want to follow you or be in contact with you, what's some of the best ways to do that, or to kind of follow your story and maybe engage further?
The best way, so there's I'm going to be putting it on my website soon. is just like you can contact us through our website, which is majoracartergroup.com. So if you just go to put my name in Google, you'll find the website. But I'm also going to start getting more socially media engaged as well. And I'm going to be working on that soon. So I'll be putting some stuff out there and really hoping, that people engage me in conversation, which will be fun. Because honestly, that's the other thing. I learned so much when I actually have an opportunity to like intentionally engage with people. And it's really fun. So I'm expecting some more of that. And
Well,
and you could also follow us on my cafe is a Boogie Down Grind, and it's very fun. And our event hall is Bronxlandia. So it's Bronxland IA, Bronxlandia. It's pretty fun. We have a blast. I do have fun. Yeah.
well, thank you for your time. I know, really appreciate you making time in your calendar and your schedule to be.
My
join us.
pleasure.
And this goes far and wide, and hopefully the lessons in your book do as well. So really appreciate the work and the legacy that you're leaving there in the Bronx and then elsewhere through your book and this type of speaking engagements and stuff. So
Yeah, and thank you all. And and also that's another reason why I want to do the stories, or not the stories, but like actually have a way to engage with folks through social, because I really want to gather some of those stories to inspire other people too. And I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm gonna do that, and it might take a little time, but I know that there's stories out there. I hear them all the time, and it's so encouraging. So I thank you all for the encouragement. I really do.
hopefully it has been. There really is a neighboring movement taking place
Yes, very much so.
nationwide. So
Go on.
let's join together and network on this and work to make our communities more socially connected, and good things come from that when we do. So
thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
thank you for joining us. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.